Welcome to Mac and Bleu, the cutting-edge podcast for the nation's builders, merging the realms of construction with exciting advancements in technology. Join us on a thrilling journey where we delve into the dynamic world of blockchain, AI, the metaverse, virtual and augmented reality, and their transformative impact on the industry. Our engaging discussions span a wide spectrum, covering not only construction, economic development, supply chain, and market segments, but also exploring the vibrant tapestry of diversity within the construction landscape. We shed light on the intersection of local politics and its profound influence on the construction sector, while championing the remarkable contributions of women and minorities in construction. For all things Mac and Bleu, head to www.macandblue.com, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky. Now let's get into it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Mac and Blue. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky, president and co-founder of Blue Wave. I'm lucky enough to have another next level growth graduate here, partner, confidant, call it what you want, Chris Prenovost. Thank you for being on today.
My pleasure.
Full disclosure, we've had Michael on before, and that went really well. It's nice to, before I dive in here, just give context to the audience here. I get asked off air a lot of times to do more of, I think, what hopefully our conversation is today, where a lot of entrepreneurs are looking of, and I'm sure you could speak to this for 5 hours, let alone one, is, hey, I've reached my glass ceiling. What do I need to do? So we're probably going to defunk everything from EOS to traction to human capital to processes, procedures, all that kind of stuff. So with that, though, I normally don't do this, but as a way of kind of paying it forward and setting the context, I'm actually going to read a little bit about Chris's bio here today, if you don't mind, just because I think it leads, and then we'll, of course, drill him on his how he got to where he is. So Chris has often said life is too short to be unhappy. We all deserve to love what we do and who we do it with, especially if you own the company. Business leaders turn to Chris when they are having trouble scaling at the rate they want. They've had it with wading through people issues. They aren't seeing the accountability they want or just feel stuck. Starting his first two businesses at the age of 18, Chris has personally seen his share of successes and failures, along with making the Inc. 5000 list multiple times, receiving numerous ethics awards, one good one, from the Better Business Bureau, and competing as a top place to work in Arizona. I love this one. He's lived in the sleepless nights. He's stressed out about making payroll. He's dealt with the people issues. He's also found that it doesn't have to be that way, and he is driven to help other business leaders find relief. And so with that, I mean, there's more here, but welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
You know how this goes. You've done other podcasts. If you could just give the, whether it's 10, 15 minutes, the background of who you are. Why are we sitting here today? What was that journey to get to this role? Because I'm sure it wasn't just this blissful paradise.
No, it's much more like the stock market, right? It's never just straight and up to the right. There's a lot of bumps and corrections along the way. So if I think back, starting my first business back, 1997, right? Before the internet was the internet, I had an online store where you could buy performance parts for cars. And that's one of the failures that didn't go so well. But I've started 6 different businesses over the years, right? But my real business, we'll call it, is one called AZ Pro.
Okay.
And that's a wide format graphics manufacturing company. We design, print, produce in-store signage and vehicle wraps, building wraps, these types of things, billboards. So if you've been inside of a Fry's store in the Valley, you've seen our work because we're their preferred vendor.
Nice.
We work with them nationally across many different states for Kroger. But that business was started in 2004 out of the front room of my house.
Like every good entrepreneur.
Yes. And typical entrepreneurial story, you dive in. My brother actually started the company. He'll tell you he loves telling a story that he was the one who went down and actually purchased the business license. So he's the president. I'm the first employee. Right?
But he did it on your credit.
Yeah, exactly. But, we had really good growth over the years, just, double-digit growth year after year. It was awesome. And made it through the turn down in 2008, got to about 2015, and the business was just, if on paper you looked at it, it was doing great. But Michael talks about this too, about many business leaders achieving success in spite of themselves and often at the cost of their mental and physical well-being, right? And that's where we were,
Let me talk to an entrepreneur that hasn't experienced that.
right? Every once in a while, somebody hits a home run, but most people, that's what they go through.
Most of us are bunting for singles and doubles.
Yeah. Getting hit by the pitch every once in a
Right.
while, too. So, 2015, 2016, my brother and I are at the top of the organization, got about 50 team members that basically report to both of us.
Okay.
Zero structure. And we had basically come to the decision to either shut the thing down, walk away, sell it for probably $0, or I was going to murder my brother, right?
It had become that there was that much acrimony between the two of you.
It was, we had so many just arguments about, well, I'm done. I'll buy you out. No, screw you. I'll buy you out. No, it's worth $0. Well, great, then I'm buying you, right?
Yeah.
And we
It's a
decided,
real brother conversation
Yeah.
coupled with the entrepreneurial spirit.
yeah, and I'm the bigger, stronger,
Of
better
course.
looking.
Let's get him on here and ask you.
So we decided we were going to give it one last hurrah and try and fix things.
Okay.
Right. We reached out to Michael Erath.
Oh, so you knew Michael at the time.
Yeah, we
Okay.
actually engaged him. We were a client.
Okay.
So we hired Michael to come in and teach us EOS and be our implementer.
So had you read Traction before?
Yeah, I was given a book by somebody, and I said, same thing that most visionary type mindsets do. They come in and say, I got a book. They're going to save us, right? And I did that, and my brother was like, he rolls his eyes. And then he says, he reads the book. He says, this is actually probably a good idea.
Yeah.
So we hire Michael and start the EOS implementation, right? And over the next 18 months, 24 months, we actually double our revenue, triple our profits. And at the same time, I go from working 70, 80 hours a week with no structure to working probably more like 40 hours a week on the pieces of the business that I actually want to work on, the ones that give me life, not all the BS that most of us deal with in the entrepreneurial seat. So I reached out to Michael because 2 years in, I'm getting kind of bored. I'm kind of wired to work 50, 60 hours a week. If I'm only working 30 or 40, I'm afraid I'm going to start tinkering with some of the stuff we put in place and fixed.
Backfired. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, I got to find something to do. And he said, well, what do you want to do? You want to start a business? I said, I actually want to do what you do. Because I look at my purpose is to, at AZ Pro, our purpose is to provide and be a company that people want to work for and with, right? I want to affect the lives of all those that are around me. And I looked at it, and AZ Pro is only going to get so big, right? And I looked at, I can affect more lives if I can help some of my colleagues out there in the entrepreneurial world fix some of the things in their businesses. So that led me to joining it was called Traction Hub at the time, then further became Next Level Growth in 2019, when became a certified EOS implementer. We can go down that whole path of how we're different and what we do differently than EOS, but we parted ways from the EOS community in 2021, 2022, and went all in on our Next Level Growth approach. Okay. I think Michael talked a bit about this, but I want to go a little bit more in depth on being, having a prescriptive system that a business has to prescribe to versus more of a principled approach, right? Prescriptive being you have to do it this way. It's the only way each and every time, and it fits every business, right? What I learned through my time on the client side was that's not always the case, right? Mm-hmm. We took these great tools from EOS, and I'll tell you, Michael always taught an EOS plus approach, right? Sprinkled in some stuff from scaling up, 4 disciplines of execution, top grading. There's a lot of different systems out there, and I don't think that any one system is perfect.
Agreed.
They don't answer all the questions. So our approach at Next Level Growth is to go out there, be the connoisseurs of all of these different systems and approaches and books and thought processes so that we can help each individual business build a more custom configured operating system for themselves, because each business is unique. And even within each business, seasons change, times change, and every business might need something different this quarter than they do next year. And we want to be able to fill those gaps and lead those clients well.
Chris, go back to, let's spend some time on the client side, because a lot of times people want to have that, what am I saying? Context, I call it that relationship of hearing your story, so that as they're listening to the next part about next level growth is that transition. So can you go back to you and your brother and everything from, what did you learn being the client? Did you exit? What did the exit look like? Where is it currently as far as either equity or whatever? Can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah. So as we went through this whole, we'll call it structure building, because before we literally had no structure. It was just everybody in the business did everything, just get the job done. Right. And there was one particular instance that I remember that was just kind of eye-opening to me. My brother's office was right next to my office, and right outside was a production table. And I walked out one day and there was a young lady working on the table, and I said, "Hey, why don't you do it this way? It's faster, it's better." And I walked away. I think I went to the bathroom or something. Well, when I was gone, my brother walks out of his office, sees what she's doing, says, "You should do it this way. This way is better, faster." He walks away. You know where this is going.
Keep going, though.
I
Keep
come
going.
back, and I'm like, "Why the hell aren't you listening to me? I just told you what to do." And that poor little girl, I mean, she's like,
She's probably balling.
she has no idea what to do.
Yeah.
Because there's no clear lines of accountability.
3 bosses.
It was just, what a mess. Right.
Right.
So through that process of putting structure in place and identifying who's actually accountable for what in the organization, it was one of those things where ultimately my brother and I are accountable. We're the owners, right? But if you want to scale your organization, if you want to grow things, you have to learn to let go of some stuff.
Agreed.
Right. And part of that is getting clear about your expectations and what you want to let go of.
So did you, and I don't know your story, so this isn't a loaded question. Did you make the mistake of starting the process before the people?
Yes.
Okay. So
100%.
talk through that, or maybe am I jumping too far ahead in what you want to talk about later?
We can dive right on.
Okay, go ahead.
So, yes, absolutely. So we had all these people issues around, right? And we can talk ad nauseum about that, right? But having right people in the right seats is key to any organization growing. And we had a bunch of wrong people around.
Was it just? Let me. I'm going to keep interrupting and asking these kind of tougher questions. Was it the wrong people or the wrong seats or both?
Both.
Okay.
We had.
How do you identify the difference?
So wrong people is somebody. A wrong person is somebody who is not core values aligned.
Okay.
That's the typical Jim Collins,
Good to great,
definition of a right person, right? Is core value alignment. I'll take it one step further and say it's really about mission alignment with the organization as well. Okay, so
there comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Bleu Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from. And we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Bleu Wave to get it done right the first time.
you've got to be clear as far as why the company exists, right? We're not just a graphics company. We're there to help people improve their lives, right? It's a very different approach than somebody who's just money driven.
Now let me switch to the coach side on that topic. You've been the client, now you're the coach side. How much of that is bullshit and how much of it is real when you go into companies?
A lot of it.
So how do you help people that are listening, watching this, just on that micro topic, get over the hump of, like, don't go to AI and ask for your mission and vision statement, right? How do you inherently get that out of people? Like, I see, and maybe I'm taking your thunder here, but I see when this topic comes up, people they're either super confident about it and they know it, or the other 90% just fake it to make it. And how do you get that out of them?
So I can usually tell when it's bullshit.
Okay.
Because, you've probably heard the saying, like, show me your checkbook and show me your calendar. I'll show you what's important to you.
Yeah.
Same thing applies in a business.
Good point.
Right. If you are espousing to care about something, but everything you're doing is pointing at something else, then that's what you actually care about. And, I had one client, this was a couple years ago. They, family business started by their mother, who was still peripherally involved, but their whole purpose was women's equality, women's rights, and they'd want to push women's involvement in the workplace, right? 12 people on the leadership team, 2 female. Okay. Problem number 1, red flag number 1 for me.
Okay.
But then everything they were doing was about making money. They weren't doing anything to, invest in the women in their organization, right? So when we started getting into the strategic vision of the organization and start to get clear about what's important, they would not admit that money was more important to them than these values that they had espoused. And there's nothing wrong with being a profit-driven company.
It's called
right?
capitalism, right?
Right. And what the problem ends up is, if you aren't clear with what you are trying to attract, you're going to attract what you say you want. But if you actually want something else, it's just going to cause frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you actually want people who are driven to drive profit, but you're over here attracting people who are more altruistic in what they're after, those are people who are going to apply at your organization.
And I bet you see a lot of that, don't you?
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it, what's the word? It's not hypocrisy, because I don't think people are maliciously doing it. It's more like don't you see it almost as a subconscious type thing?
Yeah, I don't think
within the organization. Yeah.
I think especially, recently there's been these altruistic type pushes out there in the world, whether it be DEI or, all these really big problems that people are trying to solve. So I think there's this tendency to try to cater to those types of those powers that are pulling us towards that. But if it's not really who we are, we're faking it, and it's going to show.
All right, we got off on a tangent. We were back to, I don't even know where we were. Oh, we were back to you and your brother in the organization. So get back to that train of thought.
Yeah. So we, continue with Michael and next level growth and all that, and got to a point in 22, we actually sold the company and became an ESOP.
So you became an ESOP. Wow.
Yeah. So again, kind of our whole
another
purpose,
complexity. Yeah.
Right. Our whole purpose is to affect the lives of those around us. Right. We looked at some private equity exits and some different strategic partnerships and stuff like that. But we really wanted to make sure that our team who helped build the organization was taken care of.
Out of curiosity, during the time that you were with on the client side, you said candidly that you felt you were worth 0. When you got to this stage, let's say, before you got to the ESOP, check the box, and you were, let's say some PE firms were talking to you, what did your multiplier become?
4.5.
4.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Industry average would be about 3.5.
Got it.
So
we were, 100 basis points above the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so right now we're in ESOP. My brother and I are still employees of the company. I still sit in that strategy seat. He's just recently taken over the sales seat. But we serve on the board, still from a strategic advisory standpoint. I'm in the business at this point, probably, maybe 5-6 days a month.
Okay.
So it's not heavy involvement. We've got a great leadership team that actually runs the whole business.
So in the ESOP structure, were the core people there already, or in this process, did you have to supplement or augment some key hires at the very end to get this across the finish line?
No, the ESOP basically is exactly what we had before.
Got it.
Really solid leadership team. Our finance person came to us as a receptionist like 13 years ago, and now she's our finance director, right? So
We'll go a couple more questions here, Chris, and sorry, they'll probably be endless. One thing that always comes to mind is people, not to bastardize Geno or EOS or traction, but everyone's looking for the plus, right? So were you exposed when you and your brother did this, were you already exposed to the plus side of that?
yeah.
And again, for the audience sake, what do you feel, because you know it so well now intimately, what does that plus look like for the layperson that doesn't understand? Most people have a comprehension of EOS, and we've talked about it in nauseum on this program before, so I don't want to focus too much on that box, but I am looking for the periphery, and that periphery is what, Chris?
So I don't want to say anything bad about EOS. I think
it's good.
I think it's a phenomenal foundational tool. And part of the genius that Gino did when he wrote Traction was to simplify it and make it consumable by the masses, right? You read Scaling Up, very powerful operating system, but it's like reading a stereo manual, right? It's tough to actually implement.
Agreed.
So, Gino took this and made it very simple, but I think in that he took a lot of the horsepower out of it as well.
Oh, interesting.
It's like detuning your engine in your car. You might get better gas mileage, but you don't have that much power, right? So, one of the big things that we worked on, Michael and I, when I was on the client side, was the accountability chart.
Okay.
And you talk about, I know Michael, when he was on, he mentioned, lack of expectations is going to, lead to some future frustrations, right? Well, what I found was I was doing the EOS accountability chart. It's, the role and the 5 accountabilities. Well, then I was handing everybody like a 2-page job description and saying, okay, well, yeah, here's all the stuff I actually want you to do, right? And the bottom line on that 2 pages was always to include all other duties as assigned, right? Well, that just covers my butt, but it also, what it does is it creates this ever-expanding list of responsibilities on everybody. And going back to the wrong people, when you feel the need to get like really minute in what your expectations are with everybody, you probably have a people issue, right? And we try to solve that with process a lot of the times. And part of that is the accountability chart and getting really detailed in what your expectations are with people. So we solved this at Next Level by creating what we call the mission, the most critical outcomes, and the obsessions. Okay, so it's a little bit more in depth, a little bit meatier on the accountability chart, but it's not a 2-page job description, right? It's a clear 1-sentence mission. Where's the goal line at for each of the seats on the organization? Okay. The most critical outcome is the singular trailing measurable that you can point at and say, this person is providing ROI on their payroll dollars, right? Most businesses out there, the number one expense line item they've got is their payroll.
Payroll, right.
If you're going to buy a new piece of equipment, you're going to do an ROI calc on it, right? You'll be able to tell me whether or not that scissor lift or front loader or whatever you got is going to ROI. Most people do not do that for their people, even though it's the most expensive line item on their
So is that,
P&L.
to simplify this, Chris, would that be, did you go to KPIs or something in that regard? Or what did it look like on that measurability?
Yeah, similar. So you've got KPIs, leading indicators.
Yep.
You'll have a handful of those, maybe 2, 3, 4 weekly indicators that are going to be predictive of, I'm going to likely hit this MCO. The MCO is usually a trailing indicator, usually monthly, sometimes quarterly, but that's what you can look at and say, this person's actually earning their wage.
Got it.
Right. And the obsessions are the handful of other things that we want this person really obsessing about while they're in pursuit of that mission. Okay. So, and we use verbs when we describe how we want our team members to interact with their obsessions. Right. So at the leadership team level, they own things, right? They own the process playbook. Well, owning the process playbook means that it exists. 2, it's updated, trained, regularly taught, and then you own the execution and outcomes of it. Okay. When you own it, you have a different level of involvement with it than, say, a mid-level manager who drives the process playbook. Okay. They're ensuring that the team is following it. And then the frontline workers are following or executing the process playbook. Right. So you have 3 different levels there of involvement in the same piece of collateral, the playbook, but one person owns it, one person drives it, one person follows it.
Interesting.
So that's an example of one of the obsessions that you might see on our accountability.
One of the, and this, I'm kind of giving you a layup here to, one of the arguments that I've heard is, well, let's go back to, if I'm just going to role play here. Hey, Chris, that's great. Get all these A players on the team and stuff, but I can't afford to. It's going to cost me, it's going to take my SG&A through the roof, and I can't afford it. Back to the overhead that you were talking about.
Yep.
Your rebuttal argument to that is what?
What's it costing you to keep them?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I heard Dave Ramsey one time talk about this. He's like, he was talking about somebody didn't want to train their team members because he was afraid they would get good and then leave. He goes, well, great. What if we don't train them and they stay?
Yeah, that's the classic one. Yeah.
So yeah, you can either pour into your team and drive accountability, and guess what? They might leave. But if they're not doing their job,
Right.
why the heck are you keeping them anyway?
Bingo.
Right?
Back when, okay, so the previous dialogue of kind of where the obsessions and the vision and stuff, when you did that, can you share with the audience, and maybe we're kind of crossing into part 2 of the conversation, I don't really care, the lines are all blurred anyway, is what did you see from the ownership role that was, like, I call it the aha moments of, and let me give you kind of some what I'm looking for is, did you find diamonds in the rough, or did you find perceived A players that were actually C players, or did you find that by going through this, your culture actually changed?
Yeah.
All those kind of things. What? Give me some storytelling in that.
Yeah, all of the above, right? So what happens when? Okay, so let's start with wrong people. You got wrong people. You have to smother them with process. You have to smother them with micromanagement, right? Because if you don't do that, they don't get any work done, and you're not going to get any ROI out of them. Okay. The problem is most people tend to shy away from dealing with their people issues, and they go towards process because it's easier, it's less scary than having a behavioral conversation with somebody.
Right.
I did this. So back in 2014, we started our SOP manual. It's about that thick, right? It still sits on my credenza at
Gathering dust.
No one's ever looked at it, right?
But you felt good about creating
It
it.
felt great, but no one's ever used it. It moved the needle zero. It took us like 2 years to actually complete it. So, but when you actually go into fixing your people issues first, you'll find that you don't have to document things at such a minute level, because if your process covers this and this, and the issue is in between, they can make the decision because they know now not only where we're going, but why we're going there and how we're going there, not just what to do, right? The process is what to do. Very big difference when they can answer the in-between questions, because your process is never going to cover everything, right?
On that, I know you can't give it in 5 minutes because that's why people hire you and Michael and everything. But what's the question I'm looking for? Okay, I know what it is. And I'm going to try to put this in the right words. Okay, Chris, that's all well and good. But how do you write and monitor and keep score of those people? A process is easy because you can create it and usually you can measure it. How do you, everyone always, how do you measure people? How do you measure behavior?
Yep.
And your answers are, again, I know you could go on for hours, but try to just give the audience a encapsulated view of that.
So I love this question, because that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons why people shy away from their people issues is it's not quantifiable, right? It's very hard. It's easy if your sales guy misses a sales number,
Yeah.
right? It's really hard if your sales guy is being a jerk.
How do you measure that, Chris?
How do you measure that? Oh, your jerk level is 10 this week, right? What we do is we say we need crystal clarity on the core values. Okay, so what are the key behaviors that go along with each of those core values? And we ask you guys, all of our clients, to score each of their team members on a quarterly basis. How consistently is each of your team members living this core value?
So it's a peer evaluation against the core values.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to describe that.
Yep.
I imagine it gets much more complex, but where you have to master that first.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 1 to 10 scale I use, right? 7 is the bar, right? I want to really focus on using a 1 to 10 scale, because I had one team member a couple of years ago come to me and say, hey, we need to terminate this person for core value misalignment. I said, okay, show me the last quarterly calibration. She gave it to me, and it was all 9s and 10s. And I said, so 6 weeks ago, you gave her this score. It was 9s and 10s, and you want to terminate her now.
What changed?
Well, nothing had changed. She said the 9 was her telling her she needed to improve. And I said, but a 9's an A.
Yeah.
Right, that's a passing grade still. So we had to get really clear as far as what the bar was and the grading scale we wanted everybody to use. So we removed a lot of that bias from the grading by creating just some boundaries around what the behaviors of each of those scores look like. Okay. So now you've got this grading scale for core values. You've got outlined clear key behaviors for each of the core values, and you can clearly now have a conversation when somebody's falling short in one area or another. Okay. That was one big difference that I really liked versus the EOS approach of check marks and pluses and minuses. I kept getting asked, well, what's a plus? What's a plus minus? Where's the delineation, right? Check mark, no check mark, forget it, want to have the capacity to do it. That's binary.
Mm-hmm.
But how many people, if you looked at their job, it's a binary yes or no. They're probably really good at like 75, 85% of it, but they could probably use some improvement in a couple key areas. And if we have the ability now to lean in and have conversation about those couple key areas with a coaching plan and a proper improvement plan, we can actually, get the results we're after.
Back to this, okay, so you've got that framework, and thank you. You did, I thought, a very good job of explaining that without, giving the Encyclopedia Britannica for us old people there. That's the internet for you young folks. What is the frequency of those conversations? Because weekly's too much, annual's too little.
Yep.
Again, if put your coaching hat on now versus the client side and go quarterly minimum, monthly preferable. Give me something just so the audience can have relationship to that question.
So my standard answer there is quarterly or as often as necessary, right?
Yep.
So if you've got somebody who's struggling, you probably need a little bit tighter interval on that. But if you've got somebody who's just doing okay, quarterly is usually the right amount.
Can you give an example then? Because again, let's ask the tougher questions. Through this process, have you seen both from the client and the coaching side of terminations or exiting the bad players, and what typically does it look like?
Yeah, I'll take you through one. We had a one person on our team at AZ Pro when we started this process. He had been elevated to a lead position, phenomenal at the work, right? Top notch, elevated. You need a manager. Who do you put in there? Your best guy, right? Horrible manager,
right.
Horrible leader. So he was up here, and he's what we call a terrorist because on our A player chart, high performance, low core value fit.
Yeah.
Okay. So causing all kinds of collateral damage around him, demoralizing the team, demotivating the team, losing other really good players on the team because they didn't want to work with this guy. So it was really hard. It was scary for us because
it's scary for anyone.
You've got your top performers and you've got to hold them accountable. And what's going to happen if they don't want to actually get in line with where you want to go? They hit the eject button or you hit it for them and you got a giant hole to fill, right? And that's where we ended up. He ended up exiting the organization. It hurt for a few days, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And then it was.
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Blue Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Blue Wave to get it done right the first time.
Like all of the rest of the team members kind of just filled in that gap, that void, and we were all off and running.
Culturally, but okay, so this gets back to, remember how we said it's kind of like safety. You either pay for it now or you pay for it later. Yeah. Training, you either pay for it now or you pay for it later. Same adage then, Chris, is in those days or weeks from that individual leaving, culturally what happened?
The team understood we were serious about this stuff.
Bingo.
Right. And this is where I think a lot of people cause more damage than good when they hire a consultant or something, or they go online and find out they need to have core values. Right. So they write core values, they put them on the wall, and that's the end of it. They don't actually.
It's like their BD pitch instead of their ethos, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They don't actually enforce it. They don't live by it. So they actually have an internal integrity issue going on. The team sees them saying we're going to do one thing and then not following through with it. So they lose trust in their leaders.
And that's where I was trying to go is I've heard as many horror stories about, back to what you were saying, is the perceived A player tolerating them, and then the rest of the team, who maybe isn't A, but they're B players, ascending to be A players, they see it and go, F it. Why are we going here when all they do is tolerate the incompetence there? You're actually undermining your company more than you can possibly fathom.
Yeah, you've got all these other people there with potential that are afraid to stick their neck out now because why should I, right? He's going to get all the credit, or they're going to let him do anything he wants. If I speak up and say this guy's out of line, they're taking a risk when they do that, right? We have to build that level of trust in the organization where people are willing to speak up and hold each other accountable. We get peer-to-peer accountability going, not just top-down accountability that way. But they have to know that we have their back.
We have any other stories on that front to share? I mean, without mentioning names, of course.
Yeah, we had one instance where we had a guy who was a phenomenal core value fit, great core value fit, was leading one of our teams, and for whatever reason, not getting the job done. I didn't quite understand it. I didn't know what the issue was. Had some preliminary conversations with him, and tried to get him to get in line. And we ended up pulling him in one day and saying, "Hey, we want to do a player assessment with you." And we asked him to score himself, and he scored himself high marks on everything. And then my second in command, my integrator at the time, she scored him and I scored him, and we gave him not so great marks. And, a lot of emotions. He'd been with the company like 10 years at that point. And
was this your company or someone you were consulting with? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to qualify that.
Yeah. And we said, look, we love you. We want you on the team, but you're in the wrong seat. We want to offer you a different seat.
Oh.
And this was a Friday. And we said, why don't you take the weekend, think about it. If you don't want the seat, and we understand, but that's the path forward within the company if you want to stay within the company. And he came in Monday, he said, I thought about it and I would love to do that.
Oh.
And so we made the change. He took a step down, played an awesome role within the organization for another like 5 or 6 years after that. It's great. I was about 3 or 4 weeks later at an all company meeting. Okay. So I'm up there, I'm talking, I'm going through the core values. He raises his hand and says, Chris, can I say something? I'm like, holy crap.
He thought he's just going to blow up.
I have no idea what he's going to say. Right. I said, sure, come on up. And I give him the mic, and he goes on and tells the story that we walked through with him. And he goes, I just wanted to share that, to show you guys that the core values do mean something.
Wow.
And you want to be part of the team. There's more than one way to do that. I was just like, first I was like, thank God he didn't just like say this is all bullshit.
Sabotage. Yeah.
But he was just a phenomenal part of the team for another probably 5-6 years after that.
That's pretty cool. Did you, after that, how did the team respond?
I mean, talk about building trust.
Yeah.
Right? You've got now a team that understands where we're going, how we're going to get there, and why it's important, right? So now they can start leading in. I'll tell you another story. So this was just a couple months ago. I was at AZ Pro, and I was at my desk, and one of our salespeople came in and started asking me some questions about a job. And every time she would ask me a question, I would just say, well, what do you think? How would you handle this? What do you think we should do? And she got kind of frustrated because I just kept asking her questions. And she goes, Chris, I came to you because you've got 20 years of experience doing this stuff. And I said, yeah, but I want to make sure you understand something. I had to answer these same questions 20 years ago when I had zero experience. But I could do it because I knew where we were going, how we were going to get there, why it was important, how we want to treat our clients, how we want to treat our team. You understand all those things, right? She said, yeah, I know you beat it into our heads. I said, great, then make the decisions. You know how to do it. And that's the whole point of being a scalable organization. You have to be able to clone yourself, right? You have to be able to get other people to think more like you would so that they can make decisions that are more in line with how you would make them. Otherwise, you're the bottleneck at the top of the bottle, and every question has to come to you still.
Your glass ceiling, entrepreneurial.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, where were we? I don't remember. All right, we're still, we've kind of filtered off. Okay, let's see. Let's go back to you and your brother. Was there any, again, for the audience sake, was there any lessons on the, because we've talked about this on the show quite a bit on whether it's PE versus ESOP. Naturally, we've had people on that have gone both ways. But if you don't take a few minutes. What was your experience like in that? Was there ever a question, I'm not going to ESOP, and why? Or did you, well, let me be blunt. Did you do it just for the tax reasons?
No, the tax reasons are nice.
Yeah.
Right. But ultimately, I've seen so many transactions through either my colleagues and friends or my clients. They go the PE route, and the private equity company, it's usually good for there's a honeymoon period, a year or two in there, but then all of a sudden the mask comes off and the company just gets gutted, and it's a figment of what it used to be, and that we did not want that for our organization. We could have gotten paid out faster. I don't know if we would have gotten more money, but we would have gotten it quicker. Right?
Yeah.
Probably could have been a 30-day transition period and been done. Right. Here we are 2.5 years later, still in the organization. But part of this is making the organization something you want to be a part of, carving out your seat and empowering those around you so that you can still stay involved and you want to be around.
Right.
Right. But yeah, it was never really a second thought. Once we learned that ESOP was a viable route for us, that's where we wanted to go.
Do you think being in that position has helped you then as on the coach side?
Having gone through it, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And having gone through, like I said, some of these other transactions where, just had one recently, 18 months, 16 months into the transaction, the former owner still sitting in that visionary seat. He's actually like a regional director over some other companies that the PE company had bought out. He's like, I don't even want to come to work anymore.
Well,
don't even enjoy it.
There you have it.
Yeah.
Now, okay. So next question, maybe this comes back to more the macro side of next level growth. But do you typically, whether it's you or Chad or Michael or any of the other professionals in your organization, when people come to you, have they hit their glass ceiling, or are they more in a rut, looking to sell, looking to grow? I mean, what typically, you've been on both sides of this coin now. What are you seeing the trend as through your eyes of the C-suites that are reaching out to you? What's kind of the flavor of the month right now?
I would say they fall into two categories. The ones who've hit that ceiling, they want to grow and they're not sure how to do that.
Right.
Or the other category is they are growing and they're kind of seeing the future, and they want to make sure that they've got the right structure and foundation in place so they're not building on shaky ground.
Got it.
Right. So I say they fall into one of those two categories. And
then out of those two, I realize we're generalizing. Do most people have an EOS background that come to you, or are you feeling like you're starting at grade school with a lot of them?
Yeah, most of them are starting off from square one.
Okay.
Right. We do have some that come over having worked with either a previous implementer or self-implementing EOS or scaling up or any one of the flavor of the month. Whatever seems to be hot in like EO and YPO at the time, we get a lot of that.
Like you and I were talking before about Vistage and all the other stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So some of them are familiar with some of the foundational pieces of some of the different systems out there, at least the ideas. Some of them have never read a business book, and I had them good to great, and they're like, "Yeah, I've never read that before."
It's not everyone's read Jim Collins.
I've literally had people say, I don't know who he is.
Yeah.
Right. Simon Sinek, never heard of him. Lencioni, never heard of him.
I mean, we could go, yeah, there's the top 10 authors that we constantly pitch on this show. And it's too easy. It's too easy with Audible and all you don't have to even read anymore.
No.
I almost get it infused in you.
Yeah. And that's like one of those red flags for me too, as a coach. Because if I'm looking at a client and they have taken zero effort into bettering themselves, I'm starting to go, okay, are they going to be committed to this? Because it's not an easy path.
No.
Right? It takes some work. It takes a commitment. It takes a willingness to lean in and have these difficult conversations. And that's what ultimately drives those people issues that we see rampant in almost every organization. Right. people are not willing to have those conversations.
Let's see. Oh, looking at the clock here. Would you mind if, what about this? What if we had you, again, without mentioning names, think about a success story that you've coached in the last year. Walk the audience through a scenario which will allow me to listen to things and maybe ask poignant questions. Would you mind doing that? Or would you want to take the last 17 minutes and talk about things that you wanted to address? Either one is fine with me.
No, but look at some success stories. What types of success are you looking at?
Anything, like where working, part of this isn't about me. It's about pitching you guys. It's about, as far as next level growth, about you and your associates. But more importantly, I always try to look, the main reason we do this podcast is so the audience gets inspired to go seek help.
Sure.
Because there's for every person that says, I've reached my glass ceiling, I need help, there's another 20 that listen and go, I'm too scared to ask for help.
Yep.
So that's where I'm kind of going is, Chris, is there one that you could say that you kind of cracked the mold with someone that was just on the fringe and going, we brought them along.
Yeah.
Notice I said brought them along, not pushed them along.
Yeah.
Pull leadership.
Yeah. No, there's one in particular that comes to mind that when they joined working with me about 2.5 years ago, leadership team in place, and it's fairly typical. We'll see some turnover within the first year at the leadership team level.
Should make sense. Yeah. So no one's perfect, right?
Right. And some of it is, smoking out some of those people issues, and some of it is just normal turnover stuff. Somebody got an offer in LA, right?
Stuff happens.
But in this one particular instance, there was one of the directors of the business unit, and the business unit was underperforming. Okay. And there were always these excuses, right? The word I would use to describe him is slick. Okay. And I don't think slick is ever a word you want used to describe yourself, right? Never anything his fault, always had solutions. But then when it came time for, those solutions to be due next quarter, the rocks were never done. The measurables were still off, right? All of these things were happening. And there was a lot of fear there in really driving accountability because big part of the business, right? And he was a leader and he was well liked supposedly by his peers. Okay? Well, through some good coaching there and just really, getting clear as far as what those conversations looked like and putting some crystal clear boundaries in place, we're able to get him to a place where he said, you know what, I'm not the guy, right? So he hits the eject button before he gets terminated.
He admitted it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's the best case scenario, right?
Right.
So I'll share this, through all of my time in running our people process at AZ Pro, I've only had to terminate one person. Okay. Everybody else has hit the eject button prior to that because they saw the writing on the wall. They knew that they did not either have the ability or desire to do what was necessary to stay on board. Right.
But the key there, if I'm picking up what you're throwing down, Chris, is that is best case scenario if it comes from the peer group, not from top down. Correct?
Yeah.
Then you've hit your nirvana in what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in this instance, he hits the eject button. The second in command has to cover down now because he's gone. And almost immediately, I'm talking within like a day, the rest of the team breathes a collective sigh of relief.
Okay.
Right? And that was not expected.
He was well liked.
They were afraid they were going to have mass exodus because
easy on the bounty type thing.
They did not have that happen. His best friend that was supposedly there worked for him now is elevating into a big part of his role and taking over a whole big chunk of what he was doing. Right. They're still hiring for that position. Right. So they're still covering down. But in the past year, we've seen double-digit growth again on profitability, double-digit growth on revenue. Backlog is through the roof.
And just for context, how many verticals did they have?
There's really 2 in that organization.
Okay, so this was one of the 2. I just wanted to, again, was it 1 of 4, that kind of thing or whatever? Okay.
Yeah. But that's a really good testament. I've seen this happen time and time again where we're afraid to have that conversation. We're afraid to rip that Band-Aid off. And when we do, it hurts for a little while, right? You might pull some hair out when you do it, but then it can be exposed to sunlight, and that's the best sanitizer in the world.
But if I've been listening to you, which is not easy for me sometimes, then you like that self-admission is that, again, that if you have the structure, the coaching, the people, then the process in place, these obstacles are not insurmountable. That's the whole purpose of this.
If you're clear on where you're going and why you want to go there,
All right.
the how.
Because let's be honest,
way less important.
Is like you said, altruistic as it is, you're never going to have a utopian thing. That is your goal, but it's kind of like what that saying, shoot for the moon and I'll fall with the stars or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that same adage, right?
Yeah.
It's like with this though, if you have your structure and your coaching and the accountability and everything else we could go into, get that right, and the rest of it becomes that way. When you do have obstacles, what I call when shit happens, you're set up for success instead of doomed for failure.
Yeah. And again, going back to the integrity side of things, if you're clear as far as where you're going and why you're going there, why it's important to the team, and you don't waver on that. Right. That's your guiding principle. It's how you make your decisions. The team sees that and trusts that. Right. And then when we have to go out in front of the team and say, hey, so-and-so had to leave, they trust that it was done for the greater good of the organization. And it wasn't something that was, some underlying tones there that they didn't know about. Right.
Okay. Back to my second part of the question with time we have left, there's no way I could have asked you all the poignant questions today. So in the last 10 minutes, what kind of things would you like to share with the audience that you think are very appropriate to either drive engagement or even just to reach out to you guys to get, whether you're a good fit or not?
Yeah.
We've talked about that on the show numerous times. We just want to pay it forward generally. So people are out seeking help, whether it's next level growth or an equivalent to what you guys do. I know Michael and I talk about that all the time. Yeah. We're part of a greater cause than just, our business doing business with your business.
Yeah. I kind of start here in that, leading an organization is really hard. Being an entrepreneur is hard, takes a ton of risk.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And because of that, because we take all that weight on our shoulders, sometimes we feel like we're alone, right? And having peer groups like Vistage or EO or YPO, there's a hundred of them out there, right? Having some friends that you can commiserate with a little bit, right? But also help drive accountability at that same level, right? Is really, really important. Oftentimes having that third party, unrelated set of eyes that comes in and is willing to poke and prod, and I call it mining for conflict, right?
I like that. Mining for conflict.
Yeah. So my whole approach in the session room is I'm not afraid to lose my job that day, right? And I'm probably the only person in the room that can say that.
Yeah.
Right? And I usually find that's when I'm adding the most value to the conversation, is when I'm asking those really hard questions and I'm poking and just really pushing hard to get to the underlying root cause. That's where so much of the value comes in, because we've got all these things that we, in the back of our mind, we really know is an issue, but we just don't want to deal with it.
So your arbitrage comes out in your company though too, right? I mean, like you gave examples before, it's when you're pressed up against the wall, sometimes that's when you find your best DNA.
Yeah. And I think so many times we were too busy, quote unquote, to take the time to think about what the real issues are. We're too busy to set crystal clear expectations with our team members, right? How many times have you said, hey, I need you to do this project, right? I need you to build the marketing plan, and it's due at the end of the first quarter, right? And then there's your direction, right? And we think we're being clear because marketing plan, first quarter, it's time bound. And then 31st of March rolls around and we get a document that is nothing like what we wanted it to be, right? Because we didn't take the time to actually set the parameters up and create some clarity regarding what we actually wanted, what success really looked like. So now you got a whole wasted quarter. You're frustrated. Your team member's frustrated, right? They feel like they wasted their time. They did. But whose fault is that?
Ultimately you,
right?
Or me, or whoever set that.
We didn't take the time to set the proper expectations so that our team members know what winning looks like and what it doesn't look like.
Yeah.
So it's the whole thing. If you don't slow down and do it right, you get to do it again. Right? I'd rather just do it right the first time.
Novel concept.
So, right? It takes a little bit of thought, a little bit of discipline, though, to be able to slow down and ask the right questions. When you're assigning something to somebody, make sure you're providing the right context. Make sure you're asking the questions to make sure they truly understand what you expect of them, and then check in along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you got a 3-month long project, you should have probably 3 or 4 check-ins in there at least, checking the progress. Not only is that going to, drive accountability so they don't just cram and do it all at the last minute, but it's going to allow you to course correct along the way, so you're going to get a much better work product at the end of the day.
One question I get all the time, and I'm giving you kind of a layup here to help promote next level growth, is, geez, Chris, I can't afford it, and I know how Michael would answer it, but I want the Chris version of it as far as how you talk about it versus turnover and FT or whatever. So how do you typically answer that question?
So if you think about all the opportunity cost lost by just keeping status quo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only, don't even look at the revenue and profitability, right? We can look at that. I can show you the ROI calcs on an investment with us, and it pays back like 10, 20x in the first couple of years, almost every time, right? But just think about it from a personal workload standpoint, a personal stress, family life, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of those other things that are intangible and immeasurable. That was the biggest thing for me, right? I went from working 70, 80 hours on things I didn't like to working on the things I did like. It was life-giving. I fell back in love with my company again.
On that, again, you've said it, but I'm going to ask it explicitly again. Well, geez, Chris, that's great. Who did that other 40 hours then?
Everybody else.
Right.
Everybody else did it.
Because of why?
Right. Here's the thing I think most people miss. They actually did a better job than I did. Right.
Bingo.
Because they were better suited to do those tasks.
Right.
I was reconciling the books. You don't want me reconciling the books. That is, one, I hate it. And 2, I'm not very good at it. Right. I can read a P&L. I can do the financial analysis. Got it. But when it comes to doing the reconciliation, come on.
Right.
It's $15 an hour work. Let somebody else do that. So.
Any parting shots, my friend?
I just really think that, like I mentioned, a lot of the entrepreneurial people out there in the world, just they struggle with this. They don't know where to turn, right? And it's not a hard thing to do, right? What we teach is not difficult. It's simple, right?
Are you just willing to engage?
The difficulty comes in, are you willing to do the work?
Yeah.
Right. And if you have to look at the risk versus reward. And, if you think out 5 years from now, you're going to be here. If you just keep on doing what you're doing now, is that what you want? Right. Or is it going to get worse? Right. And if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to be open-minded and have a humble approach to the business and take responsibility and accountability for all those things around you and have some difficult conversations, I guarantee you will get very good ROI, not only in the bottom line, but in your life as well.
Mic drop. We're done. Hey, everyone. Just so you know, kind of a plug again. Reach out to Chris Prenovost or Elizabeth, Michael, anyone over at Next Level Growth. If this podcast is raising awareness to you, to reach out. Having been with them in multiple cases, I can tell you they are not sales heavy. It's either a fit or it's not. So you won't get them trying to reel you in. They are genuine in what they do, and they have helped many companies, not to steal Jim Collins, but go from good to great. So thank you again, Chris, for coming on today and sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me, JJ.
You've been listening to the Mac and Blue Show, brought to you by Blue Wave General Contracting. Be sure to subscribe to the Mac and Blue podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Follow JJ Levinsky on LinkedIn and Instagram. Tune in every Monday